The NAR settlement that we've all been looking at and unpacking over the last few days may not be the end of the line in terms of all the changes that we might see. If you watched our last video, I gave you a pretty good overview of at least a couple of the changes, as well as some unanswered questions. And at the end of that video, when I was talking about those unanswered questions, one thing I mentioned was the Department of Justice and where they stand in this whole thing. And I do think that is one of the big unanswered, unknown questions that we don't really have a perfect answer on just yet. But I wanted to do a video specifically on the Department of Justice issue because it's a big one. It's really important. And it's all about this settlement and whether that's actually what we'll end up with or will it look completely different. If you remember where we're at, the settlement has to be filed with the court, right? So the plaintiffs and NAR reach this settlement agreement. We've seen it. It has to be filed with the court and the court has to approve it. And that may happen. It may get approved, but there's something else that could happen. We might hear from the Department of Justice. And this is exactly what happened in another class action lawsuit that NAR is not a party to. There's a class action lawsuit. It's called Nozalek versus MLS Penn. And in that class action lawsuit, they had a proposed settlement that was largely similar to these other settlements that we've seen. What we saw was that MLS was going to say, look, the offer of compensation is optional. You don't have to do it. And this is a private MLS. This isn't a realtor-owned MLS. So again, NAR is not a party to that lawsuit. And the Department of Justice came in and they filed a statement of interest. And in that statement of interest, the Department of Justice told us exactly what they want the real estate industry to look like as far as buyers agents and their representatives and their clients and how, I mean, they completely forecasted exactly what they want. And so I want to share that with you because you need to understand that in that filing, in that MLS Penn case, what the Department of Justice wants, in my view, is very different than the actual settlement that we have before us in the NAR lawsuit. So I'm going to read this to you because I don't want to just tell you what I think it means. I want you to see exactly what the Department of Justice has said they want. Here's one piece. As long as sellers can make buyer broker commission offers, they will continue to offer customary commissions out of fear that buyer brokers will direct buyers away from listings with lower commissions, a well-documented phenomenon known as steering. When sellers make such offers, buyer brokers need not compete on price to attract buyers. Now, I'm going to read you another piece as well here in a second, but I want to just recap exactly what that says. Right? They're saying as long as sellers can make offers of compensation, then they're going to keep doing it in a customary way, right? The customary percentages that we typically see around the country. And they're going to do that because they fear that if they don't, buyers agents will steer their clients away and only take them to properties and steer them towards properties where there is a customary, and they quote a customary offer of compensation. And they also then go on to say that, look, when sellers are doing this, then buyers agents don't actually compete on price. They have no reason to. They have no reason to create new business models, to offer lower rates, to do any of that because they're just getting paid from the seller side of the transaction. And look, people can say who pays the compensation. Oh, it's the buyer, it's the seller, it's the listing agent. None of that matters. Like, none of that matters because what we're talking about here is the Department of Justice. They've said this in a court filing that as long as you can have an offer of compensation from the seller side, doesn't matter if it's the listing agent, doesn't matter if it's the seller. If they're doing that, then their position is that buyers agents are going to steer their clients away from listings that have lower offers of compensation. Okay. Now let's look at the second thing that the DOJ says in this filing, because this is what they want to happen, right? So at first they said the problem is the offer of compensation is a problem because it causes buyer agents to steer their clients towards higher offers of compensation. Here's what they want to happen. A change that makes it the buyer's responsibility to negotiate broker commissions directly with her buyer broker would not force buyers to pay those commissions out of pocket. While some buyers might choose to pay their broker out of pocket, other buyers might request in an offer that the seller pay a specified amount to the buyer broker from the proceeds of the home sale. Thus, the current practice could continue where the seller factors the commissions into the offer the seller is willing to accept. So this is what they want. They don't want to have an offer of compensation, right? The mere fact that the offer of compensation exists is a problem for the Department of Justice. What they want to see happen is that a buyer comes to a buyer's agent, and that buyer and that buyer's agent will negotiate. They'll say, look, these are the services that I will provide. Here's the fee for that. And that buyer and that buyer's agent will determine upfront that buyer's agent's fee and whatever services they're going to provide. And then there's really two options for how that buyer's agent will get paid. Either the buyer can pay directly out of pocket, or the buyer could ask the seller in the contract to devote some amount of proceeds to paying the buyer's agent's fees. Now, what is not on the table there is an offer of compensation, right? The DOJ doesn't want that. That's not what they want. Because this whole thing, for as far as the DOJ is concerned, as best I can tell, like I'm not the DOJ, I don't have an insider in the DOJ here, but based on these filings, the issue with the DOJ is not commissions or the amount of commissions or any of that. It's really about steering. It's about the fact that the way we've done business would make it to where the listing agents or the seller, however you want to characterize it, has an offer of compensation. And so the buyer's agents don't ever have to compete on price. They don't have to change their business models. All they do is they get a buyer and they show up and there's going to be an offer of compensation and it's guaranteed, right? And they want to get rid of that. And they want to make it to where buyer's agents have to compete on price to say, look, this person will do this job for you and these services for this amount. Well, I'll do it for less, right? We're actually creating competition amongst buyer's agents. And so when we look at what that means, it's a real question mark, because what does the NAR settlement provide for? Well, it allows there to be offers of compensation. Look at the materials from NAR, everything that's been said. You can still do an offer of compensation. It just can't be in the MLS, right? You can do it outside of the MLS. So you could work with the seller up front and say, here's the total compensation. Here's what I'm going to take as listing agent. Here's what's going to be given to a buyer's agent or offered to a buyer's agent. And the seller can agree to that. And then anybody that requests a showing, there's any number of ways you could do it to have that offer of compensation to a buyer's agent. And if you look at this DOJ filing that we just talked about and what the DOJ wants, those two things are not consistent. The DOJ's filing in the MLS PIN case and the settlement in the NAR case do not mesh, because the NAR settlement still allows for an offer of compensation, just not in the MLS. And the DOJ filing says to me that the offer of compensation is the problem. That's where the problem is, because as long as there's an offer of compensation, sellers are going to continue to offer a customary offer of compensation for fear that buyer's agents will steer their clients away. That's what they said in these filings. And that's where we have a real question as to what the DOJ is going to think about this settlement. So again, what does the DOJ want? They want buyers and buyer's agents to negotiate upfront as to the services and fees of the buyer's agent. And then they want the buyer to either pay them out of pocket or request in the contract the seller to devote some percentage or amount or flat fee or whatever of the proceeds to pay that buyer's agent. Those are your two options. And of course, that still leaves open that VA problem where VA buyers can't pay directly. So that's certainly a major problem that we don't have an answer for just yet. But the DOJ does not want upfront offers of compensation based on the filings that I've seen. So what could happen? Well, the plaintiff's attorney in this case has said that he's been talking to the DOJ throughout the process. Now, that doesn't mean much of anything to me, but it could mean that the DOJ is okay with the settlement, that it's good enough for the DOJ. And so maybe we don't hear anything from the DOJ. Maybe they've said, look, this is a good good enough middle ground. And so we will accept this basically. We won't interfere, we won't intervene, that this is going to be good enough for the DOJ. And then maybe the settlement is in fact what we have, where we could still have offers of compensation. We're just taking it out of the MLS. Alternatively, we could see what we saw in this MLS pen case where the DOJ files a statement of interest or some other way of intervening to say, look, we object to this settlement that's been proposed, that we don't think it's good enough. We don't think it goes far enough because it still allows for offers of compensation, and we don't think that's appropriate. We could see that from the DOJ. And maybe we don't hear anything from the DOJ and they say, look, we're just going to sit and watch this for a while and see how it develops, see if this is good enough. And perhaps down the road, we hear from the DOJ and say, look, all those changes you made, not good enough, go further. I mean, suppose that could be an option as well. And the bottom line is, look, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did. But this is really, really, really important for you to know. Why? Because what can you do about this? Two things. The first thing is you need to be preparing as if the settlement with NAR is going to be the settlement that we get, right? We know that is there. It's likely going to be approved by the court if nothing else happens. That is very likely what we may end up with, is exactly what's in the NAR settlement, right? The stuff we talked about in the last video, things that we're going to talk about in future videos, all that stuff may be where we end up. So prepare for that. But I also want you, the second thing is to plan as if the DOJ gets what they want, right? If in fact that's what the DOJ actually wants, it's what they said in those filings, where there is no offer of compensation, right? If the DOJ comes in and says, no, judge, don't approve this settlement, it's not enough because it still allows for offers of compensation, right? I want you to think about that world. I want you to think about what that looks like. I want you to think about how that's different from the settlement and how that might change your business model, how you might have to prepare and plan for that. I think it's really important that you look at that and prepare for it, right? Plan for what we have on the table right now with the settlement, but also plan for the different scenario where the offer of compensation isn't allowed, right? I think that is critically important that you prepare for both sides, right? Because again, this whole settlement came kind of out of the blue. It came really quickly. As I've talked about it, I thought, yeah, it could happen in days, it could happen in years, we don't know. And it happened really quickly. And so we could see things happen and change very quickly, and you need to be prepared for it. So get your mind wrapped around both sides of this in case it happens. I'm not saying it is going to happen, but if it does, I don't want you to be taken by surprise and not prepared for it. Instead, prepare for it, right? Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That's what we need to do. Be prepared for a drastic change that could be more than what we actually see in this settlement agreement, because it's absolutely something that could happen because we haven't heard from the DOJ. They haven't blessed this settlement publicly. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors. We don't know what could happen in the coming weeks and months. There's a lot that could still develop. So prepare for that, educate yourself on it. We're going to do our part to always be here to give you as much information as possible. Look, there's a lot of people out there that are, if you go on the national Facebook pages, if you look at some of the material that's coming out from some very prominent people in the industry, some of it is a little, it's aggressive, it's angry, it's, that's not our style. I don't think that helps anything. I think that this is a time for calm preparation, digging into your business, getting prepared, knowing what the future might hold and what it might not hold so that you can be ready for it. Training, all these things are what we need to be doing now, not yelling and screaming about everything that we're angry about. That doesn't do anything for you. That's not going to help you. So don't freak out. Don't panic. Even the worst case scenario, people are still going to be buying and selling houses. That's not going to change. People are going to buy houses. They're going to sell houses. And people are going to want a professional, an expert to help them through that process. And yes, some people in the industry might not make it. They might not be able to adapt. They might not prepare for it and will struggle. Don't let you be that person. prepare for it, plan for it, be ready for the struggle, and you're going to be one of the people that's left standing and thriving, because there's going to be people buying and selling houses. They're going to want a professional. And that's the thing. Be a professional, get up to speed on this, prepare for those conversations, prepare for how you're going to negotiate, prepare the services and that expertise you're going to provide to your clients, and you're going to be okay. So don't freak out. Take in the information. Don't rush to anything. Start planning, start preparing. Look, if this was helpful and you got something out of this, you feel a little bit more educated, I would love for you to let us know by hitting the like button down below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, that'd be awesome if you would go ahead and subscribe to us down below as well. That lets us know that these videos are helpful, and we'll keep making them for you. And certainly leave a comment here if there's another question you have outstanding that you would like for us to address in a future video. By all means, leave that in a comment down below. We read every single comment, and we generally reply to every single comment. So we'd love to hear from you. What is it that we can do to help you get prepared? Something that we can do to help explain things to you. So please do that. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll be back here very soon with another video on all this and so much more. So appreciate your support here at our Pro Academy.